Welcome back to the Real News Network and to our segment with Sinclair Thomson, who is the author of Revolutionary Horizons, and to our discussion on Bolivia. Thank you for joining us again, Sinclair.
Glad to be here.
This is a significant moment for Bolivia and its relationship with the United States of America for various reasons. The new administration here in Washington and the new constitution in Bolivia allows a different kind of engagement, particularly in terms of disengaging from the previous history that Bolivia has had with the United States. It's had a very great stronghold on its economy, as well as in terms of DEA and drug control. And now that we have in Bolivia a president who is a coca farmer, this introduces, of course, another element to the discussion, because Evo Morales is rather determined to ensure that coca farmers are given their right to produce coca in the country. What does this all mean in terms of relations with the U.S. and its historical relations with the United States?
Well, historically, the U.S. has used a variety of different means to try to control the state and political policy in Bolivia. If you go back to the 1950s, the previous revolutionary moment in Bolivian history, the U.S. was faced with a question of how to respond to a new revolutionary government which came to power in 1952 with the support of mobilized tin miners as well as peasants. And the U.S. saw a threat, a communist threat in that moment. But rather than stamp out the revolution the way they did in Guatemala or in Iran in the early 50s, they decided to work to have a kind of constructive engagement with the revolutionary government. And within a few years, through development assistance, they managed to create a kind of economic dependency of Bolivia on the United States, and thereafter were able to shape policy making very consistently to reconstruct the army in a way that would be in the interests of U.S. Cold War project. And in 1964, the United States supported a military coup by General Barrientos, which had a very virulent anti-communist agenda and led to the repression of radical tin miners in the country. So it's used different kinds of mechanisms to control the country. In the 1980s, Bolivia adopted the neoliberal economic model in 1985. This was done with the technical assistance of U.S. economist Jeffrey Sachs, made his name in 1985 in the neoliberal shock treatment, which blocked hyperinflation in the country, stabilized the economy in many ways, but also led to the layoff of tens of thousands of workers, and inaugurated a neoliberal period in which transnational capital, which would have much more access to resources in the country. And at the same time, beginning in the late 1980s, the U.S. Began to conduct much more aggressively its war on drugs to control coca production.
And did Evo Morales' presidency get in the way of this?
Evo Morales, I think that Evo Morales himself is in some ways a product of the U.S. war on drugs. Coca growers resisted U.S. impositions, military impositions, and human rights violations by drug enforcement agencies in Bolivia. Coca growers had to fight back, and their trade union organizations were the vehicle for doing that. Evo Morales rose up through the ranks of the trade union movement to become a national politician, precisely through this struggle, first and foremost against the United States and against, once again, the threat to national sovereignty.
So as a result of Evo Morales' history,
yes.
We are facing and the struggle, we are facing perhaps renegotiating its relations with the United States.
Precisely.
And so what can we hope for in terms of improved relations so that Bolivia isn't constantly threatened by the United States? And two, what can Evo Morales do in order to, stretch out his hand, I guess, after the expulsion of the U.S. ambassador to recover the relationship?
Again, we're really at a turning point. The pendulum has swung back the other way. There's been a rejection of the Washington Consensus in terms of economic development, and there's been a rejection of the hands-on control that the U.S. has had in the drug war. So that is the real meaning of the social movements that have transformed the political landscape in Bolivia, and that's the real meaning of the MAS government. I think there are some positive signs at the moment. The current administration has just congratulated Bolivia on this exercise in democracy, the constitutional referendum. A Bush administration probably would not have issued that kind of statement of congratulations. There's signs of openness. Let's hope that both sides can recognize that times have really changed, and the United States has to let go of its role in the 20th century as the hegemon in the region, and there can be a kind of new, more multilateral engagement between the countries.
Sinclair, what's happening in Bolivia is indicative of changes that are happening in Latin America. So let's continue this discussion another time with a focus on Bolivia and Latin America in general.
I look forward to talking to you more.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Yuhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.